My name is Gertrude Wynn, 34 years old. The hospital smelled like metal and citrus, that sterile combination of bleach and panic that never quite washes out of your clothes. It was one of those shifts where every hallway echoed with the same exhausted footsteps, the same overused apology. We're short-staffed again. I'd already been chewed out twice before lunch, once by a patient's son who thought shouting equaled care, and once by a surgeon who believed sarcasm was leadership. 3 hours of sleep, one energy drink that tasted like aluminum and guilt, and I was running on pure reflex. I almost ignored the buzzing phone in my pocket. I always do. But something, instinct maybe, made me look. 6 missed calls from Hannah, my quiet kid, the one who apologized to furniture when she bumped into it. My chest tightened. Hannah never called more than once unless something was wrong. I ducked into the supply room, shut the door, and hit call. Mom? Her voice was small, like it had folded itself in half. What's wrong, sweetheart? My key doesn't work. I frowned. What do you mean it doesn't work? It won't go in. I think they changed the lock. They? Grandma? Maybe Aunt Brittany. A sniffle. Can you come home? I glanced at the clock. Another hour before my shift ended, but already my hands were shaking. Honey, I can't right now. We're swamped. Try Grandma again or Brittany. Someone will open the door. I did, she whispered. No one's answering. Keep trying, okay? I promise someone will open soon. Okay. But her voice wasn't convinced. When the call ended, I stared at the shelves of gauze and gloves, telling myself it was a mix-up. It had to be. My mother might have been 1,000 things, but she wasn't cruel. At least not to Hannah. Not like that. 2 hours later, I checked my phone again. 4 more missed calls. 1 text. Mom, I think they're here. Please come. My stomach dropped. I stepped into the hall, ignoring the monitors beeping like alarms. Come on, I muttered to the elevator. The doors were too slow. My heart was faster. When Hannah answered, she was crying so hard the words came out in pieces. They won't let me in. Who won't? Grandma, Aunt Brittany. Grandma said we don't live here anymore. For a second, the world went soundless. She said what? She told me to stop knocking. Hannah, I said, forcing my voice steady. Are you safe? I'm under the porch light. It's raining. Stay right there. Don't move. I'm coming now. I didn't ask permission. I found my supervisor and said, my daughter's locked outside. Family emergency. One look at my face shut him up. 5 minutes later, I was driving through a storm, windshield wipers slicing the dark like frantic hands. It's strange how quickly you stop being everything else. Nurse, daughter, reasonable adult, and become something more primal. I wasn't even breathing. I was hunting. By the time I reached the driveway, it was nearly dark. The porch light flickered weakly against the rain, and under it, Hannah sat curled up, knees to her chest, her backpack beside her like a guard dog that couldn't protect her. I ran, scooping her up. Her hair was soaked, skin cold as porcelain. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to get locked out. You did nothing wrong, I said, pressing her against me. You did everything right. She nodded, trembling. Then the porch light steadied. The door opened. My mother stood there with a wineglass, dressed like she'd just come from a social club. Her expression flickered from annoyance to mock surprise. Gertrude, what are you doing here? You changed the locks, I said. She sighed, as if I were the inconvenience. We needed privacy. You locked my daughter out, in the rain. She's fine, she's 11. Her tone sharpened into condescension. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Behind her, Brittany appeared, leaning against the doorframe, phone in hand, feigned sympathy ready. Mom, maybe this isn't the best. Oh, stop, my mother cut in. It's been coming for a while. We've decided you and Hannah don't live here anymore. It's better this way. Less tension. We? Brittany and I. Of course. Behind them, Brittany's kids were sprawled across the couch, watching TV. My daughter's blanket, white with little daisies she'd sewn herself, was folded neatly beside them, like a relic of someone erased. Something inside me went utterly still. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just said, understood. My mother blinked. What? You heard me. I turned, took Hannah's hand, and walked back to the car. Rain hammered the roof like static. Hannah was quiet for a long time before whispering, Are we going to be okay? Of course we are. She nodded, staring out the window. Grandma doesn't like me, does she? That one cut deeper than I expected. I forced a smile. Grandma doesn't like anyone, sweetheart. Don't take it personally. She almost smiled. Almost. Then silence filled the car again, heavier than the rain. By the time she fell asleep, I was still driving, headlights painting gold streaks on the wet asphalt. Every word my mother said replayed in my head, looping like a song you hate but can't escape. You and your mom don't live here anymore. Throwing out an 11-year-old. What a family legacy. And yet, I couldn't even call it shocking. My mother had been teaching me who she was for decades. I'd just finally decided to believe her. I pulled into a gas station and watched the rain fall through the windshield, streaks blurring the fluorescent lights. Somewhere inside, anger simmered with a slow, deliberate pulse. This didn't start tonight. It started years ago, when love became a performance and home turned into a competition. I glanced at Hannah's sleeping face and whispered, "It ends with us." The thing about surviving a house like ours is that you learn to make yourself quiet. You learn to speak in the margins, to pass through doorways without stirring the air, to fold your emotions small enough to fit in a pocket. When I was little, the house on Linden Street had 4 occupants: my mother, my father, Brittany, and me. 5 years separated us sisters, but the gap felt like an ocean I was always swimming across while someone on the shore kept moving the flag. If Brittany sneezed, Mom fetched tissues and applause. If I sneezed, Mom told me to do it quietly. Dad was the kind of tired that lived in his bones. An overworked hospital doctor who smelled like antiseptic and black coffee, who would pat my shoulder and say I was a good kid before falling asleep in the armchair with his boots still on. I adored him because at least he saw me. Mom saw only the outline she wanted to see. I learned early that too sensitive was a family diagnosis. Crying meant I was dramatic. Not crying meant I was ungrateful. Brittany could scorch a pan and Mom would laugh that kids were curious. I once dropped a glass of milk and spent 2 days grounded, the lesson written in the air like a verdict. By 16, I treated college brochures like escape hatches. Even community college sounded like Paris, a city where nobody knew the choreography of my family. I thought distance would change the script. It didn't. It just gave me new rooms to perform in. I met Hannah's father when I was 19 and operating on the self-esteem of a houseplant. He had the charm of a used car salesman and the timing of a commercial break, appearing exactly when I felt least seen. He bought me grocery store flowers once, and I mistook the gesture for a promise. A year later, I peed on a stick and watched 2 pink lines rewrite my future. 2 years after that, he was gone, disappearing like a cheap magic trick while everyone pretended to be surprised. He landed a job in another state, which might also have been another bar stool. I stopped keeping track. What I remember from that time is the math: a positive pregnancy test in one hand, a half-finished nursing school application in the other, a stack of bills like a Jenga tower, daring me to pull the wrong piece. It turns out you don't figure it out. You just do it. You sleep in 4-hour increments. You learn that crying in the break room counts as self-care. Your personality absorbs exhaustion like a bruise you forget to stop touching. Hannah and I made a life in a small apartment held together with takeout menus and overtime. We weren't happy, exactly, but we were free, and for a while that was close enough. 3 years ago, Dad retired. He called one afternoon and said he wanted to visit, to make up for lost years. And then he actually did. He showed up every week with takeout and stories, impossible patients and improbable recoveries, the kind of quiet miracles you only hear about from people who still believe in trying. Hannah adored him. He adored her back. They watched game shows and kept score like it mattered. They shared that same quiet way of observing people, like they were cataloging secrets they would never spend. Mom didn't like the visits. They complicated her narrative. Every time Dad and I laughed in the kitchen, it proved I existed in a way she hadn't planned for. Then Dad got sick. I won't name the disease because the name is a thief that steals the person and leaves only itself. All you need to know is that it came quickly and didn't leave. Mom called me one night, voice trembling in that meticulously broken way she mistakes for fragility. "He needs help, Gertrude," she said. "You're a nurse." Translation: "Come fix this." So Hannah and I moved in. I told myself it was temporary, a bridge built from pill trays and printed schedules. I ran the house like a ward. Whiteboards with med times, sticky notes on cabinet doors, meal prep labeled with a Sharpie. Mom floated around like Florence Nightingale, except her uniform was stemless wine glasses and denial. When Brittany visited with Ryan and the kids, Mom lit up like a string of summer fireworks. She staged dinner parties that looked like auditions for sainthood. After they left, the lights dimmed and the house returned to its original weather. There are soft, holy moments you don't forget even when the rest blurs. The night Dad couldn't sleep, so we sat on the edge of his bed and listened to the rain graze the roof. He told me about the first time he held me, how I'd looked at him with old eyes, like I was an overdue bill he'd finally remembered to pay. He laughed. I laughed. We pretended we weren't all bleeding time. He kept a small notebook on his nightstand. Patient stories, half-finished thoughts, grocery lists that didn't matter anymore. Sometimes he would write Hannah's name like he needed to see it on paper to steady himself. After he died, the house changed its face with speed that felt obscene. The funeral flowers hadn't wilted when Mom started humming her way through the rooms with a paint roller. "Fresh energy," she chirped, rolling pale yellow over the walls of his room. She changed the curtains. She moved out his books and framed photos, replacing them with pictures of Logan and Grace. Within a week, the room looked like a catalog: new bunk beds, themed bedding, a toy bin labeled with their names. Not one picture of Dad. Not even one. I stood in the doorway wearing my black dress and felt like I'd wandered into a stranger's house where my father had never existed. The visits multiplied. Brittany's family arrived almost every weekend, as if Mom were auditioning for a new life, and they had the starring roles. They had their own keys, their laughter echoing down the hall, the house a stage where Hannah and I became understudies. Mom called it healing. She said the house felt alive again. Meanwhile, our room, the smallest one down the hall, held 2 beds pressed against opposite walls. Mom called it cozy. I called it a reminder. One night, while steeping tea I wouldn't drink, I heard voices in the kitchen, the kind that try to muffle themselves and fail. "Rent's outrageous," Mom said, low and purposeful. "It just makes sense for you to live here full time. We'd all save money." A pause, then softer. "Besides, Gertrude won't stay long. She was only here for your father." The words traveled through the hallway like smoke. I stood there holding my mug while the tea turned the color of rust, and wondered when grief had become interior design. When I confronted her the next morning, she smiled as if she'd caught me being dramatic again. "You said you were here to help your father," she reminded me, sweet and surgical. "He's gone. You have your job, your own life. It's time to move on." Move on, as if grief wore a watch, as if loyalty had a due date. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a number I recognized from Dad's legal paperwork. "Jonathan Wells," the voice said, warm and precise. "Just some documents to finalize." I drove to his office imagining insurance forms and signatures that changed nothing. He met me with a folder and the kind of calm that makes you suspicious. "Your father placed the house in a living trust," he said. "He wanted to ensure stability for you and Hannah. You're the trustee. Your mother isn't on the deed." The words hovered, then landed. "I don't understand," I said, while some deeper part of me absolutely did. "It's yours to manage," Jonathan clarified. He transferred it before his death. He slid the copies toward me. The paper felt heavier than it should have, as if ink could turn to iron. A corner of me wanted to run straight home and slam the proof on the kitchen counter. Another corner, the larger one, wanted to wait. The right time mattered. Grief was a raw thing. A truth delivered with the wrong timing could turn into a weapon. I thanked Jonathan, tucked the documents into a manila envelope, and drove them home unopened on the passenger seat, the way you carry something fragile you're not ready to see. That night, while looking for a flashlight in Dad's old toolbox, I found a square of paper with his handwriting, the familiar slant that always made me imagine him writing in moving cars between calls. It wasn't a letter, just a fragment. "The house is a promise. Steady ground for Hannah." I pressed it flat with my palm, then tucked it under the tray of wrenches, where it wouldn't become an argument, only a truth I could hold when the air got thin. I didn't tell anyone about the trust. Not Mom with her fresh paint and sudden hospitality, not Brittany with her boxes that multiplied like rabbits, not Hannah, who needed to sleep without new variables. I told myself there would be a right moment, a clean place to set the truth where it wouldn't shatter everything all at once. 5 days later, I learned that waiting works both ways. You can wait for the right moment, or the wrong moment can choose you. The morning began with the kind of quiet that feels suspicious. Hannah left for school with a kiss and a reminder to bring home her art project, paper daisies for her blanket, because of course she loves symmetry. I charted my schedule mentally, planning to call Jonathan about next steps and maybe ask him how long right time is allowed to last. By afternoon, the house had a new sound, the click of a locksmith's kit. I stood on the walkway holding a grocery bag and watched as a man in a rain jacket knelt at our front door. Mom hovered nearby, arms crossed, voice pitched light for the benefit of the neighbor pulling in across the street. "Security upgrade," she chirped. I stared at the basket of flowers by the door, the one Hannah had painted years ago with uneven daisies, and felt something crack that had nothing to do with ceramic. "Mom," I said, careful, measured, "what are you doing?" "Privacy," she answered, not turning. "We're due." The locksmith worked quickly, efficient as a drumbeat. Metal scraped. The bolt slid into place with a neat, final click. He handed Mom 2 new keys. She didn't offer me one. She didn't even meet my eyes. That night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe like a stranger and understood at last that waiting had become a luxury we couldn't afford. The envelope in my desk drawer felt less like paper and more like a door. In the morning, it would open. The rain returned the next morning, tapping against the window like a reminder that nothing truly ends. It just changes tempo. I made coffee strong enough to wake the dead and stared at the manila envelope on my kitchen table. Inside were the documents that could shift everything, the ones Jonathan had called straightforward. There was nothing straightforward about dismantling a family. But clarity has a gravity of its own, and once you feel it pull, pretending ignorance becomes impossible. I called the hospital first. "I need a few days off," I told my supervisor. "Family situation." The pause on the line told me he'd heard the weight under the words. "Take what you need," he said. Then I called Jonathan. "She changed the locks," I said. His sigh sounded almost rehearsed, like he'd been expecting this chapter. "Do you have access to the trust documents?" "They're right here." "Good, bring them." His office was 10 minutes away, 10 minutes that felt like crossing state lines between old habits and whatever came next. The wipers kept a frantic rhythm, the kind of percussion that syncs perfectly with adrenaline. When I arrived, Jonathan looked calm in the way only people paid by the hour can afford to be. His suit was charcoal, his tie a narrow blue slash that made him look unshakable. "This is straightforward," he repeated after scanning the papers. "The property is in the trust. You're the trustee. Your mother has no legal standing." "Then fix it." He nodded, fingers already dancing across the keyboard. "I'll draft the notice." "How long?" 20 minutes. I paced near the window, watching rain crawl down the glass like nervous handwriting. The hum of the printer, the click of staples, every sound seemed magnified. When Jonathan turned toward me, an envelope sat neatly on his desk, cream paper sealed under a single line of ink. "Do you want to serve it personally?" he asked. "Or shall I?" I laughed once, sharp as glass. "You do it. I've had enough doors slammed in my face for one lifetime." He printed a second copy, slid it across the table. The ink was still wet, smudging faintly under my thumb, proof of something irreversible. An hour later, we were parked half a block from the house. The same rain, the same gray sky, like the world was stuck on repeat. Hannah was safe at a friend's house. I'd promised her I was running errands, a phrase so harmless it felt like a lie. Jonathan adjusted his umbrella and stepped out. I stayed behind the wheel, engine idling, eyes fixed on the porch. Mom answered almost immediately. Even through the blur of rain, I could read her body language. Arms folded, chin high, a queen interrupted. Jonathan spoke evenly, too far for me to hear, but his posture was composed, hands steady. He handed her the envelope. Mom didn't even look at it at first. She said something sharp, dismissive, probably a variation of, "I'm busy." Then she glanced down. Her mouth froze mid-word. Behind her, Brittany appeared, mug in hand, hair perfect for the performance. She snatched the paper from Mom, skimmed the first line, and her face cracked open in shock. Jonathan stood still, rain streaming off the umbrella. He said something brief, likely a polite translation of, "You've been evicted," Brittany shouted. Mom gestured wildly, glassy-eyed with disbelief. Jonathan turned away without another word, his calm and armor they couldn't penetrate. He slid into the passenger seat, closing the door behind him. "It's served," he said. That was it. 2 words that felt like a verdict. The drive back was silent except for the wiper's steady sweep. I expected triumph, or at least relief. What I felt instead was exhaustion, the kind that settles into your muscles and makes victory taste like ash. At the next red light, Jonathan said, "She'll try to fight it." I'd be disappointed if she didn't. He almost smiled. "I'll handle any filings. For now, she's officially trespassing." "Good," I said, though the word didn't sound like me. He got out near his office, umbrella blooming open again, and disappeared into the gray. I sat for a long time, staring at the raindrops sliding down the windshield, thinking about the strange shape of justice, how it never feels the way you imagine it will. When I finally drove to my friend's apartment, Hannah was coloring at the kitchen table. She looked up, eyes wide. "Did you talk to Mr. Wells?" "Yeah. Are we going home soon?" "Yes." She nodded, her small, serious face softening. "Grandma's going to be mad." "She's been mad since 1987, I said. Hannah giggled, a small, bright sound that cut through the heaviness. "She'll survive." The next few days blurred into paperwork and waiting. Jonathan called one evening while I was folding laundry that didn't belong anywhere yet. "She's already hired counsel," he said. "They're claiming you fabricated the lockout." "Of course they are. They're also alleging undue influence over your father." I laughed, because caring for a dying parent now counted as suspicious. "Let me guess. Brittany's idea." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. "I'm filing for emergency possession," he said instead. "The police report will help." "The report? You did file one, right?" I had that morning. I'd sat under flickering fluorescent lights at the police station and told a young officer that my mother had locked an 11-year-old outside in the rain. He typed quietly, his fingers pausing only once. "That's neglect," he said when I finished. "You did the right thing." Jonathan attached the report to the petition, and within 48 hours, the judge signed the order. Fastest justice I'd ever seen. Mom's lawyer tried to stall with a motion full of italics and zero evidence. The court denied it before lunch. Jonathan called again that afternoon. "The sheriff's office will schedule enforcement, probably within the week." "Already? You wanted it quick." He was right, I did. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, Hannah asleep beside me, the envelope of trust papers resting on the nightstand like a sentry. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel hunted. But peace and waiting are cousins, one gentle, one dangerous. When the email arrived 2 days later, I read it 3 times before it sank in. Writ of possession, immediate enforcement, Thursday, 10 o'clock a.m. I printed it, placed it inside the same envelope that started this storm, and whispered, "We're going home." Thursday came gray and cold. The sky looked metallic, the air thick with the scent of rain that hadn't yet fallen. I dropped Hannah off at school, told her I had errands, and drove toward the house that had raised and rejected me in equal measure. 3 cars in the driveway, Brittany's SUV, Ryan's truck, Mom's sedan. Of course, the full cast. 2 deputies stood by the front door. I parked down the street, pretending to scroll my phone like a stranger. Voices rose from inside, Mom's sharp, Brittany's theatrical, Ryan's low rumble of misplaced authority. One deputy knocked again, firm. The door swung open. Mom appeared, hair immaculate, fury shining through the cracks. When she saw me on the sidewalk, she pointed. "She's the one. She forged everything." The deputy didn't even flinch. "Ma'am, we have a court order." Brittany appeared behind her, holding her phone like she was live streaming righteousness. "This is abuse. You can't throw out a widow." Ryan muttered something about lawyers and rights. The deputy read the order calmly, his voice steady over the noise. "You have 15 minutes to collect essential items and vacate the property." Mom laughed, brittle. "You can't be serious." He was. The next 15 minutes sounded like a play unraveling. Drawers slammed. Boxes thudded. Brittany cried louder. Ryan swore under his breath. Mom repeated, "This is my home," as if repetition could rewrite reality. And then it was over. They emerged one by one. Brittany first, carrying a stack of clothes and 2 framed photos, one of her kids, one of Dad, stolen from his old office. Ryan followed with a box of something heavy, glaring at me like I'd written the script. Mom came last, pausing on the threshold, eyes glassy with disbelief. "I hope you're proud," she said. "I'm tired," I answered. She left without another word. The deputies handed me the keys. "It's yours now," one said. 3 words heavier than I'd imagined. When their cars disappeared down the street, I stepped inside. The house smelled like dust and old perfume, like endings. A half-finished glass of wine sat on the counter. A jacket hung on a chair. It looked like they'd vanished mid-scene. I opened every window, one by one, until the rain-cooled air swept through. Somewhere in the quiet, I thought I heard Dad's voice. You did what you had to. For the first time in years, the house didn't argue back. The next morning felt unreal, like waking in someone else's life. The house was silent, no footsteps, no perfume clouding the air, no Brittany humming for attention. Just quiet. Actual, clean quiet. I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching the backyard tremble under a light drizzle. The garden Dad once tended had gone wild, ivy creeping up the fence, weeds brave enough to bloom. I let the steam from the mug rise and thought about how strange it felt to belong somewhere again, even if the walls remembered every argument. When I picked Hannah up from school that afternoon, she ran toward the car, her backpack bouncing. "Did you get the errands done?" she asked, sliding into the seat. I smiled. "Better. We're home." Her eyes widened. "Really? Really?" She looked out the window as we turned onto our street. When the house came into view, she went quiet, watching it the way you look at a dream you're not sure you're allowed to touch. "It looks different," she said. "It is," I replied. "It's ours now." Inside, she dropped her bag by the door and started wandering from room to room, her fingers brushing the furniture like she was greeting old friends. "Can I pick my room again?" "Any one you want." She chose the smallest one, the one we'd shared before. "It's cozy," she said, smiling at her own joke. I helped her unpack a few boxes, then left her arranging her books and drawing supplies. The house echoed with the small, human noises I hadn't realized I missed. Running water, a light switch clicking, the shuffle of bare feet across wood. That night, after Hannah fell asleep, I wandered into what had been Dad's office. The air was heavy with the scent of paper and dust. His notebook still sat on the shelf where Mom hadn't bothered to look. I opened it to the last page and found a line scrawled in his uneven hand. "Sometimes you have to start over where you were first broken." The words hit me harder than any verdict. I closed the notebook, slid it into the desk drawer, and whispered, "Okay, Dad, I'm trying." Days blurred into weeks. No calls from Mom, no texts from Brittany. I blocked every number anyway. Peace looks different when you've been starved of it. It's not loud or dramatic. It's Hannah humming in the kitchen while she makes toast. It's the creak of a door that no longer means intrusion. It's finding that sleep finally arrives without a fight. Still, the past doesn't vanish. It lingers like perfume on old curtains. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for Mom's footsteps or glancing at the driveway expecting headlights. None came. A month later, Jonathan called to say the paperwork was complete. "Everything's finalized," he said. "The house is fully secured in your name. You're clear." "Thank you," I told him, "for everything." He hesitated. "For what it's worth, Gertrude, most people in your position don't have the nerve to follow through." "I didn't have a choice," I said softly. He laughed gently. "You'd be surprised how many people pretend they do." After the call, I stepped outside with a spade and a packet of seeds Hannah had picked from a shelf at the grocery store. "Wildflowers," the label said. "Easy to grow." We cleared a patch by the fence where Dad's old rosebush used to be. The soil was damp and dark, the smell of rain still clinging to it. "Everything grows faster when you stop shouting at it," Hannah said, quoting something she'd heard me mutter once. I smiled. "Then we'll give it quiet." We pressed the seeds into the soil, our fingers muddy and cold, and covered them gently. When we were done, she wiped her hands on her jeans and leaned against me. "Do you think Grandma's still mad?" she asked. I thought about it. About Mom and Brittany. Somewhere under another roof, replaying old arguments, fighting for a house that didn't want them anymore. "Probably," I said, "but that's her problem to water." Hannah giggled, and it sounded like sunlight breaking through clouds. Weeks passed, then months. Word about Mom trickled back through the town's gossip vine. She'd moved in with Brittany and Ryan after the eviction, but it hadn't lasted. Apparently, she'd started rearranging their furniture, giving orders, renaming closets pantries. The explosion came fast. Ryan left. Brittany posted something vague about toxic people and boundaries that everyone knew wasn't about a coworker. Now the two of them lived together, locked in what my old coworker described as an ongoing Cold War with scented candles. Someone even sent me a screenshot from a community page. Mom selling Brittany's old dining set online. Brittany had commented, "You don't even live here." Symmetry, I thought. Beautiful, inevitable symmetry. I didn't reply. I didn't even laugh. I just went outside to check on the wildflowers. Tiny green shoots were breaking through the dirt, stubborn and bright. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear echoes of old conversations. Mom's voice saying, "We've decided you don't live here anymore." My own voice answering, "Understood." And then Dad's, softer, from somewhere I can't name. "The house is a promise." He was right. Not a promise of revenge or ownership or proving a point, just stability, steady ground. One evening, I found the extra set of keys Jonathan had returned after the court filings, the duplicates the sheriff had carried. I labeled them with a strip of masking tape, "For when she's ready." I didn't know who she meant, Mom, Brittany, or me, maybe all of us. I tucked them into a drawer and left them there, not as an invitation, but as proof that I refused to become what hurt me. 6 months after that first rain-soaked night, the house finally felt light. Hannah's laughter echoed off the walls as she chased our cat through the hallway. The air smelled of something baking, her experiment with cinnamon bread. The wildflowers outside had grown wild indeed, reaching for the fence as if claiming territory. I sat by the window, watching the evening fade into gold. The world felt smaller, kinder, manageable. Peace isn't dramatic, I thought. It's just what remains when the shouting stops. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough?